It's always nice on a Sunday when I get up incredibly early to come down here and see all of your faces. I really do love coming down here. It's always a joy and a pleasure. It was a little earlier this morning. I'm also cat sitting this weekend, so the cats are going, why are you here at 6 in the morning? Well, today, as they say in the soap operas, where we last left, when last I was here, I was talking about finding ourselves in others and the importance of seeing and respecting and honoring other people, where they are, who they are, what they are. And I shared with you the opportunity that I was having to go to the Parliament of the World's Religions in Salt Lake City. Well, see, now the goosebumps are starting all over again. For 5 days. This was an incredible experience. And it was truly the opportunity to know myself through the eyes of others, to know them through my loving eyes. And it was a joy. And I told you that I wasn't sure. I knew I had the opportunity to go there, but I wasn't sure what gift or gifts I was going to receive. And I'm here to tell you and to share with you the big the big gift that I share with you, and that is, there is peace on earth. There is peace on earth. No matter what we see or hear, no matter what concerns we have, right here, right now, there is peace on earth. Now, I know you're probably not hearing that if you're listening to the news. I know you're probably not hearing that when you talk to some neighbors or family, friends. You may not be talking with them. There could be that going on. But there is peace on earth. And that was the big takeaway message that I had from being at the Parliament of the World's Religions. There we had, to remind you, we had 9,500 to 10,000 people coming from all parts of the world, from about 80 different countries, representing over 50 faith traditions. All the way from the most formal of religions, say of Roman Catholicism, all the way to the less formal, which we may find in indigenous beliefs. We had there people who even didn't believe in a God or a higher power. Everyone was welcome. Nobody was turned away. And that was the amazing thing, to know that there is peace on earth. And it was right there in Salt Lake City. Now, I don't know about you, but my eyes were really opened wide when I found out and learned about Salt Lake City. I had the stereotypical version and image in my mind of Utah being 100%, okay, maybe 97% members of the Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and that it was all very one-focused. And that's when I came to realize that there is peace right there in Salt Lake City, because the diversity within that city is enormous. While there is certainly diversity within the convention center where the Parliament was held, there is diversity within the city itself. There is peace on earth. So let me share with you, this is sort of a little travelogue. Let me share with you some of the places where I found peace and knew peace while I was at that Parliament. And it started with the opening ceremony. Because we were in a part of the country that was so populated by indigenous people, what we call Native Americans, what is called First People or First Nations around the world, they opened our ceremony. And we had a procession of I don't know how many different kinds of First Nations that were represented. They had their own little plenary session, a group where we all came together. And there was one on indigenous beliefs and faiths. And what was amazing was it was scheduled to be an hour and a half. Hour and a half came and went. 2 hours came and went. 2.5 hours, and a lot of people are going to other sessions and other things to do. 2.5 hours, I have to admit, I left. 3.5 hours later, it ended. Because they wanted every one of the indigenous nations to be represented on that stage. Now, mind you, they had like somewhere between 3 and 5 minutes to speak. So you can imagine in 3.5 hours just how many of those indigenous populations were represented. It was truly amazing. There is also a water ceremony. Water is one of the key aspects in spiritualization. And water is seen as purifying people and situations, elements of the world, in almost every tradition. Water is one of those unifying things out of which we find the energy of peace. And as you can see here, there are all sorts of people here. In the middle here in the blue, that's Michael Beckwith, who is a member of the New Thought movement out of Los Angeles. You may notice over here the person with something over their mouth. I want to explain that so you understand. This person is a Jain, Jain. They're a very traditional and long-lived faith tradition in India. And they are so aware of the value and the respect for all living beings, every single one, that they do whatever they can to ensure that they are not in a position where they harm anyone. They wear these masks, and it's usually over the nose as well, so that they do not ingest by breathing in some living creation that might come in. You ever been somewhere and next thing you know there's, some sort of little fly or little insect that, shows up in your mouth and you go and trying to get it out. And in California, and I don't know about here, we called them no-see-ums. Yeah, because you can't see them, but they're coming in. The Jains wear the mask so that they do not harm them. When they walk, they take a broom and they gently sweep so they don't step on anyone. When they eat things that they do not have to kill. And that goes true with vegetables and fruit. So they make sure that they're eating something where the plant or the tree continues to live, and that they literally only eat the fruits of that living entity. So they're fine with lettuce and with apples and pears and cucumbers and squash. They do not eat tuberous vegetables, potatoes, sweet potatoes, carrots, because to eat those, you must pull it up out of the ground and it's no longer living. Now that may go to an extent beyond what you can understand, and that's all right. But water is as important to the Jain as it is to any other faith tradition, and we see them all represented, or at least many of them represented, in this water ceremony. There were many concerts that we saw, and one of them was the International Children's Choir of Salt Lake City. They have their own international choir, just from local people or just in the suburbs of Salt Lake City, and they're all wearing their traditional garb of their culture. Salt Lake City. There is peace on earth in Salt Lake City. We had the opportunity to go and hear the Mormon Tabernacle Choir. We were actually part of the audience for one of their live programs, music and the spoken word. Don't know if you've ever heard or listened to that. And we were there while they were sending out that message. And there were a whole lot of us there. I think about half of the seating capacity was filled with people from the Parliament of the World's Religions. We also saw a huge number of members of the Salt Lake City Symphony playing there with music that had just been debuted the week before, written and composed by a Christian who had so much honor and respect for the Sufi tradition that he composed a piece in that honor. And one thing that was truly amazing, all of this was amazing. There was so much going on. I cannot even begin to tell you. Every session, every time period, like from 8 to 9:30, every one, there were like 20, 25 different things to do, all throughout the day like that. The choices were amazing. By the time I was coming back, I couldn't remember half the things I'd done. I just knew that in my heart there was peace and love. That's what I came away with. One of course, the things that's always enjoyable is watching a mandala being created. And here you see it in its creative process. Buddhist monks create this mandala, a representation of peace, of all things coming together. You can actually find coloring books with mandalas in them now. It's so popular. But the Buddhists do it in a very special way. You can see that it was a big table. I'm going to say the thing ended up being, about 4 feet in diameter. And they start out by laying it out. You see the pictures. This is sand. This is colored sand that they put into these metal instruments. And then they rub it so that it makes it even finer, so that they can provide detail. And you can see just how close these people work. I mean, they spend their time bent over in silence as they are creating this beautiful painting. It took them 4 days to complete this 4x4 mandala. And here's the completed view. Is this amazing or what, with the picture of the Dalai Lama in the background? The detail there is just totally unbelievable. To think 4 days. And at the end of this, literally, it was on the very last day, even after the closing ceremony, that they finished, and they weren't even sure what time it was going to be that they finished. Okay, that's how expansive this was. And then they blessed it. They blessed it with some music and chanting, that really deep voice chanting. And then, here's the really amazing part. They sacredly released it. They took this piece that they had spent 4 days creating, and they, as lovingly as they created it, they lovingly released it. All that energy of peace. And as you can see, they have quite a process of doing this, but in the end, that looks almost as beautiful as the mandala itself. And then they spread the peace. There is peace between me and this headset. They sweep it all up into a circle. They then have little bags and spoons, and they take out pieces of the sand, and they give those away so that they spread the peace, so that people like me can go out and tell this story and have that little bag of sand. And whatever's left over, they spread into a river so that it spreads out to the rest of the world. If that's not peace, I don't know what is. So these are some of the formal things that I participated in. But you know what? We had plenty of opportunities to have other kinds of experiences. One of the things that was so interesting was the number of New Thought people I kept bumping into. Well, not literally, but you know. It started from the very beginning. Here I am with soon-to-be Reverend Cherie, who came down here with me about a year or so ago. We had arranged transportation to our hotel, and it was a shuttle bus. It held 6 of us. Turned out all 6 were going to the Parliament. There were the 2 of us in unity, and the other 4 were religious science. Now think about the odds of that happening. With all of the people coming into Salt Lake City who had nothing to do with the Parliament, needing a shuttle into downtown to end up all New Thought. That kept happening, particularly for me, throughout the entire experience. One day I was going off and had dinner by myself, and a really nice Japanese restaurant, and they were starting to become crowded. They were just right across the street from the convention center. And so I let the hostess know that if there was anybody else coming in alone, particularly if they were, in the Parliament, and had one of our name tags on, to have them, feel free to join me if they wished. So 2 people did. The first one came, and we were talking, and we asked each other about our faith traditions. I, of course, said unity. This woman not only went to a unity church, she went to a religious science church. Now, this is out of 9,500 people. The second person who came in, while she didn't go to those churches, she was attending a school of metaphysics. Are we not all about metaphysics? Okay, now, 1 out of 9,500, but 2 experiences like that? That's amazing. And the very last experience I had as we were leaving the blessing and the releasing of the mandala, talking to a couple of people outside who were going back home to a Unity church. I cannot tell you. Those are just 3 of them. There were plenty of others of them as well. We had the opportunity to have meals together with a Sikh tradition called Langar. It is the time when Sikhs come together and they offer food for people around. No cost, no love offering taken. This is their spirituality. This is one way that they bring peace. Anybody can come. They ask in the Sikh tradition to take off your shoes and cover your head. So that's why you see so many people with, white, what looks like hankies on there. It's there. And they are being served a meal. By the time at the end of every meal, they donated the leftovers to food banks and shelters in the area. We also had the opportunity to experience the Zoroastrian tradition of turbans, wearing a turban. Here was peace by, this is something else we do. And you can see that one is being put on here. And here you see 4 Zoroastrians with your basic, ordinary Unity ministers. On the right, almost Reverend Cherie. She'll be ordained in February. And Reverend Kelly Isola. And there they go, and having conversations. It was amazing. But more than anything else, and to top it all off, we were experiencing each other. There were opportunities to participate in plays, and we danced, we sung, we chanted. There's so many things that are spirit, mind, body. Just a lot of different kinds of experiences. When choosing out of all of these things I could do there, I made choices based on 2 things. If I didn't know the word, didn't know it, I went to it. If it had something to do with an experience rather than a lecture, I went to that. I had to make choices somehow, and that's what I did. I had a wonderful conversation with 2 Bhakti Hindus and a Zoroastrian about one God and the divinity of all of us coming from that one God. There's peace. Every morning at 7, there was the opportunity to pray with various people. There were at least 15 different groups you could go to for prayer. And 2 of them really stuck out for me. One was a Sikh prayer. We're in conference center, so, the rooms are just really standard. They did their best to create in their room a temple. So you walked into the room, and again they asked you to take off your shoes and have a head covering. And then they created a temple-like feel, because you cannot have shoes and you must have your head covered when you go into the temple. And they did the service. Instead of talking about the service, we spent an hour in service and prayer with the Sikhs. Oh, and then if you had questions, you could talk to them afterwards. But it was just that. I spent another morning in something called Prayer for All. It was run by an Episcopalian and a Hindu, and when we walked in, we were each given a candle. This is another universal symbol: light, fire. And so we all had a candle for us to take home so that we could spread that peace to everyone. And the two who were leading this prayer did their thing, and then they opened it up to anybody else. Whoever was in the room, if they wanted to come up and pray in their faith tradition, they were willing to do, they would allow that. So we spent the next hour listening to prayers from all parts of the world and all of these faith traditions. Some involved music, some involved dancing and chanting. But the thing that really was most honoring for me and really showed me that there is peace on earth was when a Muslim gentleman stood up to pray. He's from Iran, and he was in tears. He was crying openly because for the first time in this country, he felt loved and respected. The Muslim community is not very well understood in this country, and it certainly isn't helped by the media. There's such a very, very small percentage of Muslims that do some of these things that show up on the news. 97, probably 99% of Muslims are warm and loving people, just as we are. And he was in tears because he'd never experienced the kind of welcoming that he had at that parliament from everywhere, from everybody. And so many of them, because it was held in the United States, so many of them Americans. In tears. That's the sort of thing that peace is and that we do have in the world. One other interesting thing is when you go to a conference, you always have a name tag, right? So you have a name tag. What was interesting about these was that the name tag had no sense of really who you were. No faith was identified. No, pastor or imam or anything was written on it. They did have where you were from, but that was it. It was just your name. And I know, in fact, of a case where a woman had a name tag and requested Reverend be put on that name tag. And then that person walked around and saw that nobody else had that distinction on there. And it finally came to this woman that we were all there, not representing our faiths, not representing our stature within our faith, but representing us, our hearts and our minds. And that was the important part. And once that person really understood that, they went back to the desk and asked for a new name tag without the Reverend. Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing stuff there. Now today, we heard in the Daily Word that Lee read, scripture from Romans. We know that all things work together for good for those who love God, who are called according to His purpose. We know that all things work together for good. All things. Now, this scripture, just like every other scripture, is, interpreted in many different ways. But let me share with you my interpretation that came as a result, if you will, of this experience at the Parliament. I started asking, what are things? A lot of times when we say all things work together for good, well, somehow it's going to miraculously come together. And while, yes, that's a concept of faith, but what I want to suggest is those things are people. It's you and me. We know that all people work together for good. And that's what peace is. And peace is here. Piece by piece, we work together to create peace. Piece by piece, just like a jigsaw puzzle. Piece by piece. And we know that when we're partway through the puzzle, going, I have no idea where this is going. If you're like me and my family, we'd always start with the edges, because that's the only thing we could be sure about. As a kid, we had a puzzle, and it was nothing but cats. We didn't know how to approach it, because cats are there had to be like 50 cats on this thing. We started putting it together from the eyes. Think about that, from the eyes. That's how we could tell them apart, and yet all the same. So piece by piece, people work together for good. At the end of each of our services here, and certainly throughout many of the Unity churches, we conclude with the song, the peace song. Let there be peace on earth. I want to suggest to you, instead of let it be as if it's somewhere way off in the distant, we're not sure, but we think we can see it over there, and we're moving towards it, but we're not quite there yet. Let there be peace. I want to suggest to you that there is peace. There's peace within us when we allow that to happen. There is peace amongst us. There is peace right here in this room. There is peace wherever we go. At the local, at the state, national, global level, there is peace. So whenever you listen to the news, whenever you hear some family member talk about, this is what I hear when I see family is, whatever ailment du jour is going on. And that's not to make fun of them, because there is that physical presence of lack of peace within. But whenever we hear these things, whenever we hear things on the news, and we know that this is happening, that isn't peace, that's not peace. What I want to suggest that we do is remember we are a piece of peace. And that we can work together with the other pieces, with the other things, to bring good to come forth, to bring peace in our corner of the world, which, just like the Buddhists, can spread as we move around town to town, city to city, all around the world. We spread peace. And it is in that way that we work and that we are, that there is peace on earth. So let us take this opportunity, and as we go into meditation, as we experience meditation right now, I invite you to see yourself in peace, of peace, as peace. When you know that peace is within, that is who and what we all are When we know that, we know that we walk into any situation, any circumstance with peace, sending that energy, sharing the energy of peace, spreading peace. Knowing that whatever is in front of us, we can be peace. We are peace. And it is when we know that, when we know the truth of who we are, God's beloved expressions of peace. When we know that, and we feel that, we share that. I invite you now to spend these next few moments in the quiet, really knowing peace within, and seeing ways that you today, right now, can bring peace, to be peace in any situation you encounter. Peace. Peace. God is peace. God is peace. As divine expressions of God, we are peace. This is the who and the what. Peace does begin with each one of us, piece by piece. coming together for good, bringing together the good, living the good. This is peace. And here we know that there is peace on earth. And so it is. Amen.